let's link up with Krista on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Who the heck is Jacob Saldaña, and why should we care about you?
Well, I guess, I do struggle with that question, because a lot of the work we do is trying to let go of the identities and the labels that others put on us, let alone the ones that we put on ourselves. But to wrap it up in a nutshell, I guess I would describe myself as a health lifestyle entrepreneur. I have businesses in regards to gyms, superfood cafes, and now kind of a holistic wellness center called Space B.A.R. And I think you should care about me because I'm one of those few that will keep it absolutely 100 all of the time, to the point in where I had to establish 3 different businesses because I didn't feel comfortable with just selling fitness or personal training as this end all be all. So I was like, damn, I got to create a nutrition option for you. I got to create a recovery option for you because I truly understand the holistic approach to this lifestyle if we want it to be sustainable. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I take pride in not being somebody who dives too deep in one direction and tries to become a guru in that space. I'm that guy who knows a little bit about everything. So that's why you should care about me. And because I care about you. Shit.
There we go. Love that. Love that. That's one of the best answers I've gotten. So now, you set the bar even higher for the guests that come on after you, but that's a good thing, right? Challenging ourselves to be better.
I'll take it.
So before we get into your path to how you've gotten to where you are today, some of the challenges that you've been currently facing, have faced over the past year, keeping it light, what's your go-to coffee order?
I do just like it black. So part of that is probably from my dieting days.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And trying to eliminate the unnecessary calories.
Where you can.
So when it's something that I'm doing every single day, I try to keep it basic. But a little bit on the bougie side, I am a big fan of like medicinal mushrooms. So integrating those into our drinks, because I am aware of trying not to become too dependent on one thing, whether it's caffeine or whatever substance it might be, to like mixing some of those reishi mushrooms in like a nice calming latte is also a favorite.
Do you have a favorite among the brands in that space that are starting to emerge? It's becoming a hot thing.
We've been with Four Sigmatic since day one. So when we opened our first cafe in 2015, Four Sigmatic was just kind of getting started, and we've had them ever since. So we use their elixirs in several different drinks. Awesome. So Four Sigmatic has been our go-to.
Nice. So let's start with FitBar then. And to give this rest of this conversation a little bit of context, maybe if you do want to move in somewhat of a chronological, order, great. But it sounds like that was really one of your original babies, if you want to call it that. And what was the impetus behind starting FitBar and starting the cafe?
Yeah. So like me and my brothers, we're business partners and we've kind of done everything together. So, we never really had any vision or dreams of being entrepreneurs. Never really had any kind of framework for it, no examples. It wasn't until, in my case, a relationship got me to try to think outside of the box and how I could figure out how to relocate or whatever it was, right? So that's what kind of first planted a seed. And we started with gym. So we bought into the Anytime Fitness franchise, somehow pulled all of our money. And, this was at a pretty young age. And the Anytime Fitness was established, but they weren't the franchise that they are currently. So they took a chance on a couple of young guys without really anything to put up except for some credit cards and whatnot. So we opened up these gyms, and we had 2 of them, and real quickly, we at that time, this was 2011, 2012. There was this idea of Anytime Fitness, which is kind of a hands-off gym model, 24/7. Everyone got key swipes. But we knew that we wanted to have a little bit more of a community around what we did. So,
Sure.
we came out the gates with a lot of personal training, both private and semi-private. And, our goal was to really have some influence over the lives of our members and, get them the results that they were ultimately coming to us for. Right. And it's like, so the training conversation was pretty easy for us to have, but in order to get these results, like we needed to have some conversation of nutrition, and none of that was happening. It just wasn't the environment for it, and it seems counterintuitive in where they go hand in hand for a lot of us now. Like
Absolutely.
we try to, but back then, and even now, honestly, like we can talk about it with the three different businesses that I have, like you we're trying to get people to connect the dots, but
Mhm.
people go to the gym because they think that that is going to solve their problems. Like, so they're going to the gym because maybe they're more fitness oriented, or they've received more fitness messaging, and that's going to have them feeling better. So they weren't even willing or ready to have any kind of nutrition conversation, even though we knew that this is what they needed. So in a roundabout way, we're like, okay, if we can't have this conversation inside the gym, what's the easiest way in order to get them thinking about, a post workout smoothie in order to get this recovery process started? So we built a little smoothie shack kind of in the parking lot of our gym. And that was the first version of the Fit Bar. So we didn't even really tell our members that it was us doing it. Like, obviously they saw us
Oh,
kind of going
okay.
in there,
Yeah.
but also it's just like we wanted the neighborhood to see the Fit Bar as its own entity, its own business, and whatever people's perceptions of us as being gym guys, the Saldaña brothers being gym guys who own this gym, we wanted to kind of have a little barrier there so that we can meet people where they are. So if somebody was coming, they could come to us without any strings attached to talk about nutrition at the Fit Bar and get a smoothie or an acai bowl or whatever it might be. So just trying to create different lanes for people to find us. Um, so yeah, that was kind of the beginning of the Fit Bar, just trying to solve the problems of not being able to get a nutrient dense real smoothie in people's hands when everything else was kind of like fake strawberries and syrups and questionable supplements. So yeah, that was the start of the Fit Bar, and it's been a journey. We have 5 locations open now, and definitely a beast to run, honestly. This is where like you really have to start thinking about who you are as an entrepreneur, what kind of characteristics you bring to the table. Because running something as simple looking as like a smoothie bar becomes really challenging because there's a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
day to day things that need to be managed. So you need to be a pretty process oriented person in order to operate within those margins. So yeah, it's been interesting.
So let's talk about that piece, especially in the context of working with your siblings. I imagine there are some challenges there, right? Just in the familial relationship crossing over with the business piece. Did you guys pretty quickly like figure out how your roles would shake out in managing that, or what did those potential growing pains look like?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like some of the growing pains that we still suffer from today, because
Sure.
we have this very common work ethic. So that was always our strong point. Like again, like we didn't have these unique characteristics where like somebody's like really good at marketing, one's the numbers guy. You
Okay.
know what I mean? We all wore every single hat. So that's when you're big about like on like self improvement, right? You start recognizing these things about yourself, and the things that got you to where you are aren't necessarily the things that are going to get you to that next level. So the things that I'm very grateful about within me and my brother's relationships and personalities is that we are diehard for each other first and foremost, and then we are willing to do what it takes. So we each held full-time jobs when we first opened our gyms. So we each worked 40 hours a week, and then we had 2 days off. And since there was three of us, we each filled in 2 days at the gym, and we opened the gym 6 days a week. So with that being said, like we all did every aspect of it, which was needed because we were essentially part-time, full-time at
Sure.
the
Sure.
gym.
Hmm.
So early on, by doing that, that's what got us open, got us successful. But now we really need to focus on delegating and assigning different tasks and different roles. So that's been kind of a challenge to come out of, because you get so used to doing things a certain way, and to a certain standard that you can do, as knowing exactly what you want that end product to look like, and being able to back away from that and then delegate has been definitely a challenge and a learning curve, for us. But relationship wise, like, we're pretty much, since there's three of us, we were able to kind of like vote on certain things, when needed, but we you typically agree on most things, so it's been relatively smooth.
And I imagine that the delegation process and the need for it became increasingly important as you then jumped into FitBar and we're now managing even more. At what point did you leave the full-time jobs that you had to focus on any time in FitBar?
For me, it was about a year into the first
Okay.
gym. So my situation was a little different than my brother's. So the relationship that I was in at that time is what, again, why I started looking
Mhm.
to try to do something for a little bit more passive income, because she was from California. Me and my brothers were all from Seattle. So there was this need to relocate down to California, right? So figuring out a way to do that. So that's why I left my job first. So I
Okay.
left in order to relocate to California.
Mhm.
So for probably 4 or 5 years, I was flying back and forth from California to Seattle every single week.
Wow.
Um, and then Daniel, my brother, stayed on a little longer, and then eventually we all went full time. Probably about 3 years into the gyms. But you're right about the delegating thing. Once we started doing FitBar, and that was a whole nother thing. And I relocated down here. Um, Delegating is instrumental to moving forward, and I haven't felt more in a cross fork in the road than I do now, in order to really get better at that.
And I would imagine too, the benefit of working with a member often in your values being the same, and you mentioned your work ethic really matching up
Mhm.
well. There's a sense of very implicit trust and the ability to be able to kind of say something to a sibling or family member and they get what you mean. They might not take it personally if it's in the heat of the moment or something like that, right? But you also know that they're going to get the job done. You don't necessarily have that same trust when it comes to hiring somebody that you don't know all that well.
Mhm.
So to take that delegation piece to the next level, obviously that means bringing in other players here. Where are you at in that process right now, having mentioned that you're at a bit of a fork in the road?
Where I'm at is trying to find that trust, and where because and where I know that this partner or this person is going to be able to do it, not necessarily how I do it, but do it in a way that has the end goal in
It
mind, right? And
aligns.
that
Mhm.
was the thing that I could always count on my brothers, is like,
Right.
regardless, there's that inherent trust that no matter what happens, you got my back and I got your back. And a lot of the times, you don't, there's that insecurity with that. It's one thing if it's kind of an entry level employee. I still need that person. Just I feel like I need that person just like anybody. Like, I need all those pieces to this puzzle. And over the years, people come and go. And I don't know if I'm an empath or what it is, but like, I get very vested and connected to everyone that comes in here, right? So it's like, when someone leaves or doesn't, do something that they said they're going to do, I kind of low key take that personally, and
Yeah.
in order to protect myself from that, I end up not giving that trust fully, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so it's been a big area of my focus to do better, and I know I can do that by removing myself from being in that day to day every single moment, and trying to sit back and, make better, less emotional decisions. Um, so it's an ongoing process,
Of
but
course
I
it
am
is.
taking some conversations right now to kind of help manage me and my ideas, and create a little bit more space so that I can operate with a little bit more of a buffer and make um, more reasonable decisions.
And I think it can just be so hard to separate the emotional piece because you've given your life and all of your energy to this. You know, before we hit the record button, we were talking about like, where do we find the balance of not losing your personal life and being able to manage your own health and your own wellness and your own stress.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that protection and sense of wanting to hold on to something or react in a certain way just comes from keeping stock of like all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into whatever the project is, whether that's, you know, any of the examples we're talking about with the gyms, with Fit Bar, et cetera, or just something that's like a side hustle for someone or a really big passion as it begins to grow. I think that's really where that tension can come in.
Yeah, I mean, because how it shows up for me is that this lack of trust, and it's not trust in the sense that like, hey, I'm not gonna like let you close the till or even open the space. Like I'm very trusting when it comes to that. Where it shows up for me is this like below the surface insecurity that things are going to get done, or that you're even going to show up for a shift, right? And part of that is just because of the 10 years of doing this, that unfortunately
You've
people
had those
don't have the work
situations.
ethic and aren't like you necessarily. They're not
Yeah.
wired the way that you are, and people say they're going to do something, even in as far as like accepting a job with certain stipulations and then not doing it. So over time, like I've been somewhat conditioned to kind of feel this way, which ultimately makes me to try to get ahead of the problem. Okay, I'm always going to be available, or I'm going to be close to the store for whatever it might be. So I'm
That safety net.
always on. I'm always there, and I'm always on, and it doesn't allow for like the focused workout for me, or the focused float for me, or the sauna, because I'm always got that below the surface. Yeah, do I got it? You know what I mean? I'd like that's where it shows up for me, and why it's really hard for me to balance it, because of that. So honestly, I don't even know exactly where the work starts on that, but it's something I haven't solved, right? Like I would love to not have that, and that's kind of what I'm working on right now, is because it does ultimately come down to procedures and operation, because if I was the type to sit down and write all these things out and have this exact
Of course.
system for this person, I wouldn't necessarily need to be next to the phone, because that's right there for them. Like you know what I mean? And like, that's something that I control. That's something that I can do. So trying to get organized and, more realistically, get the right person with the personality to do that, because I'm not that. I'm not a micromanager. I'm more of like the creative type. I have the vision. I know I can tell you exactly what I want it to look like, but I'm not the one that's going to write that down, because again, I get caught up in the way that maybe I am a freaking empath, because I'm thinking about this individual, this new crew member, what's their learning style? What's, how do they operate? Like I'm very interested in
tailor
the
it to
human
them.
nature. Exactly. And it's like, so, because I think of myself in that position, and I'm not going to thrive in a position where it's like, here's the list, you do this way. Like I'm going to be like, I'm a big like why person. Like I question every single thing that's told to me. So I'm probably hella annoying. I know my girlfriend thinks I am. But it's like, I would be that employee where it's like, why do we grind the coffee to 19.5 grams, or why? And therefore I don't like to operate off of those procedure things. And therefore I don't spend so much time on that, but it is ultimately what's going to solve my problem. So trying to get somebody in to do a lot of that again for me, it's going to be great.
Before we move into Space Bar, I want to go back to something that you said at the very beginning of our conversation in explaining how Fit Bar came to be out of Anytime. And it's about the idea of the separation that I think still very much exists from my own coaching experience and my own personal journey, going from being in the group fitness environment as a group fitness instructor to then really pursuing a passion for nutrition and going all in and focusing on nutrition coaching. I don't believe that, especially in that type of environment in particular, which is obviously different than the gym concept of something like an Anytime, right? I'm talking more of your boutique fitness concept, smaller classes, etc. there's not a lot of the marriage of the two between fitness and nutrition. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to better merge them together, but it also takes the knowledge that can often be deep, which you touched on is like you're one of those people who knows a lot of different things about a lot of different things versus going all in on one. So you mentioned the idea that like, okay, instead of explicitly trying to teach these people about nutrition because they're not ready for it, they're going to the gym, like they want to take care of the fitness piece. Let's make it a little bit easier by bringing them the food. I imagine part of the thought process there was like, what are some of people's nutrition pain points? A lot of it is thinking that foods are healthy, that until they really start to dig into what they're eating, where it's coming from, how that fits into their other food choices, their drink choices, they don't have the full appreciation for why what they're doing isn't working. Then they run back to what they are comfortable with or what they've convinced themselves will get them results, aka the gym, right? I know I'm kind of like talking in broad strokes here, but I really would love to understand how you saw FitBar as kind of like the next step. And then when, if at all, did a little bit more of the behavior change start to happen where you really could bring in the nutrition coaching piece?
Um, yeah. So
I know there's a
like,
lot there.
yeah, no, I mean, so for us, it was, and a lot of, what we try to put outward are the things that we're struggling with
Mhm.
personally, right? So, um, for me, even though I haven't struggled with my weight for damn near 20 years now, I still have a lot of the disordered eating patterns kind of that go through my head, right? So it's like for me, it's always
Yep.
been a real challenge to um, understand nutrition from the standpoint of like fueling performance and like when I would go to the gym, I would almost like my eating habits, like I just would not eat to sustain the extra effort,
Exercise. Yeah. Mhm.
so it's like trying to put these two right together and where people thought about them, at the same, like very in the same sentence, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? You go to the gym, the same thing is going to be, what are you recovering with? Or, trying to bridge that gap to not separate the two. So it was an easy transition, literally, by just saying, for our coaches and trainers now to be like, okay, go grab a post workout smoothie over at the Fit Bar. So that direction was very easy once we gave them an
Right.
actual choice and we eliminated like any real effort from their standpoint.
Mhm.
And then like the Fit Bar side of it, like I was saying, like we wanted the neighborhood, the community to see this as like a standalone business that was doing smoothies in a way that Seattle really didn't have, which again was just like whole food, pretty simple smoothies. We decided to do plant-based proteins just from more of a to balance things out with I'm not vegan or plant-based by any means, but I do get a lot of animal protein. So for me, it makes a little sense to kind of okay, let's get some plant-based proteins in and
Absolutely.
just balance it out a little bit. But we had a whole new segment of people that came to us that never even stepped foot into the gym, but still had the same goals of wanting to look better, feel better, and move a little better too. But they just weren't gym people, so they never went to the gym.
Sure.
So we had this whole new group of people that came into the Fit Bar to start this conversation of better health. So for us, then the challenge was to, all right, how do we get these people to do a little bit of resistance training and movement? So that would be through like different boot camps that we would offer through the Fit Bar, beach workouts. Really trying to then nudge people into that lane. So like no matter what it is, our goal is to bridge the gap and merge all of these things together. We're just hitting it from a different conversation depending on where people are coming to us
Right.
from, you know. But now where the state of things are now, things over literally over 10 years, it is a lot more common now, at least in our gyms, to have that conversation. So now our coaches and our trainers, it's the expectation. We set that from the beginning when we first bring in a new client that we're going to have our hand in shifting their eating habits, and it's part of the fiber of like who we are at our Anytime Fitness gyms. So it's becoming a lot more expected, I guess, from the client. at least the demographic that we're bringing into our gyms to understand that like it needs to happen on both fronts. Um, if that makes sense at all.
It does. And it leads me to another question because I actually had a really interesting conversation with our mutual friend, Chase Tuning, about this. Where does the onus lie in terms of if you're somebody who is doing one of the two things, let's call it like you got the nutrition thing going, but maybe you're not seeing results because the fitness is missing, or vice versa, which is what I work with a lot. It's like this person is like, I'm in the gym 6 days a week. I've been doing the same kind of workout class, whatever it is, for a long time, and I don't feel like I'm seeing the results. And something that I've identified as a challenge from the boutique space is that often the coach doesn't have the knowledge or expertise to really guide someone in the appropriate nutrition direction. So when you're working with hiring different people who are in your gyms, and then even, same thing with FitBar, like what kind of qualification or types of conversations are you looking to have someone to make sure that they are a right fit for your culture of both of those businesses?
Yeah. So kind of understanding that it's very hard to find that person that kind of has it all. So
Very.
the easy answer for us on the gym front is like we get trainers who first have this understanding that it's necessary. And if they lack the information at that point, like we'll put them through precision nutrition,
Mhm.
or some, we'll help them through a certification.
Okay.
Anytime Fitness as a brand now, they're just actually purchased Stronger You
So
and
I actually
absorbed
got my
that.
start, and I'm like so glad that we're talking today because I got my start in the nutrition world by being a client of Stronger You. And I
Cool.
love Mike. I love what he stands for. He jokes that he created Stronger You by accident off of a Facebook post. And when he shared yesterday that Self-Esteem purchased Stronger You, I just thought to myself, this is such a great sign that this style of nutrition coaching will be able to get to the masses. Like, I think that's such amazing news.
Yeah, no, it is amazing. So we'll see how that kind of shapes up within the
Hmm.
Anytime Fitness model,
Yeah.
and kind of how that is structured. But obviously the brand SEB, Self Esteem Brands, who
Hmm.
created Anytime Fitness, believe in this, right? And like it's been the code that we've all been independently trying to crack at our independent locations for a long time. And
Absolutely.
the real change happens when it becomes very wide sweeping. If we can get every Anytime Fitness on board with running whatever the protocols are going to be to like onboard a client into the nutrition front, and how to hold them accountable, because that's the biggest challenge with any kind of nutrition coaching, and honestly online fitness training too. The gym to a certain extent, but like you can hold people accountable when you're training one on one, right? Like
Of
you're
course.
seeing these people. Yes, we try to have a little more influence on those days that they're not with us, but nutrition side of things, that's all day. They're away from you. They're away from you all the time. You're not
Yep.
sitting down with them for 2 meals a week or 3 meals a week. You know what I mean? Like you are if you're training in person. So it really becomes about accountability, um, which is a challenge in and of itself, and which is why like you can't have really any of these conversations without mindset and trying to actually shift that accountability onto the person that is ultimately responsible for changing their situation, right?
Can you say
So
that part one more time? Because I think that's so important to emphasize to the listener in a
yeah,
matter
that
of we can't want it more than you.
yeah, for sure. Like I mean, accountability, whether it's fitness or nutrition, is the end all be all. And as a coach, yes, our job is to create some accountability within that. But at the end of the day, you're solely responsible for your results. And starting with mindset, like if you don't have the right mindset coming into it, and that's why so many coaches start with the why. Why
Mhm.
are you coming to me to work on your nutrition or your fitness? It's to get you to understand that you're worth this, and that ultimately you possess all the tools that you need, at the end of the day, and we're just here to support you in that. And that's been kind of the hardest thing for me personally to take on any clients, because I've always really desired to do that because I feel so removed from any kind of transformations that are happening out there or whatever, that I kind of have always really wanted to I've worked with a few here and there, but only with what time I had available. But like, I really want to do more of that. And if I could figure out how to shift and get that person mentally ready, and just be right there with them, like I would love to do that. But I absorb so much of the win or the wins or the losses that if you're not ready to hold yourself accountable, I just can't take that anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen too much of that, and it's like I wear that. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh
I
yeah.
can't separate myself from that. So mindset is always the first thing that I talk about with everything that we do, because I'm trying to make a try not to feel so closely attached to your goals, even though I can't remove myself from it.
Oh yeah, I think so many coaches struggle with that too because you get into this industry with the desire to help people, but there is a degree to that stops at the fact that you can't want it more than that other person. And sometimes just letting go as the coach and saying, okay, like this person just isn't ready. And I think the hard part about it is it's just that there's something in there that if you could just help them work through it and unlock it, how that will have an impact on their life that is so much greater than the 30 minutes you're spending in that nutrition coaching session, or even with a workout for a class, a personal training session, whatever it is, it's going to trickle into everything else and to just making them a better version of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on. So, I mean, again, like I really do try to reflect with, how I show up in all these spaces and, what that is. And, like for me, that's so tied up in this like need and desire to want to be liked, right? So it's like I go over and beyond for all of these people that I potentially work with, or even just customers that come through the Fit Bar. And try to do too much for them, even for the employees, like I try to do too much for them, which isn't what people need all the time, right? So like that's my shit that I bring to the table. That
Mhm.
is all. It's very hard for me to remove from it, but that's why I'm trying to create a little more space so that I can, because my default is to jump right in there and absorb that for people.
What led you to that realization of trying to do too much for people in an effort to want to feel liked, and because that's something that I think a lot of people can't always like take the step back and look at themselves to understand why they do the things that they do.
I would say, I mean, just it being happening over and over and over again, and kind of like just it's because it's a daily thing. It's every
Mhm.
single day. Like it shows up in different ways, but it's every single day, that it ends up happening for or to me or for me, I guess, whatever you so um like in the it's it ends up being, because I mean that's definitely what I narrowed it down to, of like this desire to want to be liked. So in the case of like working with the client, it's removing almost every single excuse from me being responsible. So, whether that's like numerous outreaches or investing in an app so that I can kind of remotely be there for you, you can text me or whatever it is. It's at the end of the day, like knowing that so many people aren't ready for this change, but you come to me or any other coach saying that you're ready for this change. Again, I'm just kind of jaded from past experiences and people not seeing things through, that the percentage of failure is typically greater than the success rate, right? So it's like
Yeah.
when that time comes, I'm trying to prepare myself in this relationship to be like, hey, I did every single thing that I could, and that you now knowing that it wasn't my fault. And therefore, if you could come to the conclusion that it wasn't my fault as your coach that failed you, therefore you're not going to blame me for your failures. You know what I mean? Like that's how that shows up in that relationship, which ultimately, if I wasn't so concerned with that, I wouldn't be so connected to that, I guess. That makes sense at all.
No, it does. And it's also a tricky one because there's a lot of positives in being that way too, right? Because it's yields a lot of conscientiousness and just care, and it can make you a better employer in so many ways. So it's like that constant struggle of like, well, how do I draw this separation so that it can also be healthy for myself, but giving those other people what they need, and to for them to feel empowered and but also supported at the same time. Because I know from personal experience, there are times in roles that I had where I was so empowered, but it was to the point where I felt like I would have to go ahead and just make the call on something and then deal with the consequences of it later. And that is a little bit of a catch 22, whereas it would have been great to have that initial conversation with my boss to be like, hey, like, let's brainstorm on this together to make sure that that the vision that you have as a leader aligns with where you want to go, and me feel like I can just kind of make those decisions in my own hands without having to like beg for forgiveness after the
Mhm.
fact.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. It's tricky, So sometimes I didn't I wish I wasn't so inside my head and everything. But like you said, it's like it's a fine balance of like respecting these things that are inherently like unique about you, and like, recognizing them as kind of like your superhero strengths, you know what I mean? And it's like
Yes.
where do you balance with working on your weaknesses and kind of doubling down on your strengths in order to, create that future version of yourself that you really want to become, so yeah, I do try to find some gratitude in these little things about myself that do kind of cause me some issues, but I am very thankful and grateful for it, like you said, because a lot of good does come from it as well.
And I think what we're talking about can be very well summed up in terms of self development, and that can take on a lot of different forms, whether it's meditation, journaling, exercising for the sake of just like clearing your head. So, what does that look like for you in your life?
Yeah, for me, it's morning, a little morning stillness. I don't have a full on routine. It's definitely I wake up really early, so I have kind of forced quiet time because there aren't really things open and available. So like I spent some time in that, and then learning kind of a breath practice has been a game changer for me, to just kind of carry that throughout the day. Again, it's not really one that where I sit and I do 10, 15 minutes of breath work. It's more of like this conscious awareness to always come back to the breath and slow things down throughout the day. So that's my way of mindfully kind of meditating. There's a lot of little things that I catch myself doing throughout the day that is my version of mindfully being present. And it's funny how it shows up, like, I've been really pushing to get some new employees over here at our Pasadena location. And part of that process with bringing on new employees is training them. Right. And it's like
Yeah.
trying to, like, when I'm in their training, like I catch myself doing these things that are probably not the normal, and, but I do it because it's something that I've done for years to make sure that I'm present, So it's like when I'm making a coffee, for example, because I still wear all the hats. Like I'm in there whipping up coffees, making smoothies or whatever it is. I notice that I'm not just blindly sticking the portafilter into the grinder. Like I'm consciously watching, like I'm focusing
Yeah.
on these
Yeah.
little details because that's how I am present in the moment, So it's like these are all, whether it's meditation, like that's the goal, right? The goal is to be present and focus on a specific thing like the breath or a touch, so that when your mind wanders, you bring it back. You are training that ability to do so. So those are those moments when I do that. An example is again the coffee or the breath. The breath is the one that I always have with me. I don't carry an espresso machine next to me all the time. So the breath has been my game changer and my saving grace, um, over for sure the past 2 years, to the point where it's all that I've had to fall back on, like during COVID and expansion and open up these different locations. Like, you know, hitting the gym, wasn't happening. Eating well wasn't really happening. To a certain extent, I got some tactics that have really became a go-to, but it was the breathing that allowed me to not only build a stronger aerobic foundation during this. So I was actually working on my fitness through the breath, tapping into the breath to be mindfully present. When I was getting very stressed out, which was inevitable over this past year, trying to keep things
Of
together, it
course.
was again the breath that allowed me to down regulate and get into a parasympathetic state, or as close to one as I
Mhm.
could. So for me, yeah, it really is all about the breathing, and not really in the way that you see it. You know, you hear breath work and you think holotropic breathing with people doing heavy breathing, hand
Right.
clams, having these, very esoteric experiences, or you see Wim Hof doing some crazy shit, like whatever, right? Like that's not my approach to it, and that's not how I integrate it within my life. But man, it's very impactful if you can tap into a breathing practice.
And I think you just made a great point in both the breathwork example, even in your joke about how your breath is always with you and the espresso bar is not, that it can be accessible and doesn't have to look the same as whatever, inspiration you're getting it from. Like even with meditation, so many people think that it has to be them like sitting on the ground, like within like, their legs crossed, like the room is quiet, their eyes are closed. That might be too intimidating for you in the first place. Or in your case, when you literally just have so much going on, to then go back to the point about being present in the moment with making a coffee, like it becomes truly a part of your day to day that way.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and even the precursor to being present and making that coffee starts with the breath. Like if I'm breathing in my chest, and I'm having a stress, I had maybe a stressful interaction with somebody, and I take that to then gotta go make a coffee, and I'm up here, and I'm still carrying that stress. I'm not going to be present in making that coffee.
Huh.
So before I can actually appreciate that smell of the coffee grind or whatever it might be, you have to slow that breath down and be in a position to be aware of those things. So game changer, like definitely even helped me with this gnarly back pain that I've been having for years. Like it literally is crazy, right? Like it really is the go-to. And I think if we could bring more awareness to it, and really get people to think about the end, like again how all these systems work together and
Hmm.
what the end game is, like the recipe or the program would look completely different than what is currently available to them. And I think that's ultimately my goal, is to bridge that gap, and give people an alternative to um, a program, a lifestyle design that checks all the boxes, in a way that is sustainable and enjoyable.
I'm 100% with you there. And I think that's also the perfect segue into Space Bar because we're starting to talk a little bit more about recovery components. So, share a little bit more about that and how it came to be and where you're at with it today.
Yeah, so Space B.A.R, as you can see on the shirt, is I'm big on so B.A.R. B.A.R is this creating space to breathe, adapt, and recover. So that's ultimately what it represents, and it's kind of that same thought process with the breath. Like if we're not creating space, we're gonna be just reactive to the external stressors that are coming our way. We're not gonna be able to breathe, make a decision, and respond. So we're at the mercy of what is happening to us versus actually being actively engaged and taking control over kind of ultimately what our next step is. So creating space, and it's kind of like hitting the space bar, that little bit of a gap.
Love that.
Um, and then yeah, so it's kind of a crazy story if you got a second on how
Go
it all
for it.
came to be. So for me, and obviously I'm very reflective on like what I'm doing with my life, how I'm showing up, while trying to work on my um, little things that I don't necessarily, I wouldn't say like about myself, but the things that get me into trouble, or create things hard, make things
That's a
harder
good
for
way
me.
of saying it.
Right.
Yeah.
So back in 2016, we purchased this property down in Sunset Beach, California. We built out a fit bar there. It was going to be a dope spot. Like we were all in on this investment, like right by the beach, and we doubled down, put everything again that we had in there.
Okay.
Like a 2-year process that we did this construction, and we're since we bought the property, we are paying this mortgage this entire
Mhm.
time as we jumped through all these loops. Finally got the business open in like 2018. So I remember telling myself, like, dude, like that was a horrible process, like it was really bad. Like, quit trying to do more, like double down, go deeper on this community. and just enjoy what you've created and really hit this one out of the park, right? So told myself that. Lasted about 6 months, right? I was like, then I started getting this urge just like to go and do something else. And at that time, a friend of mine hit me up and was like, hey man, like we're thinking about opening up this gym in Pasadena. The problem is that where it's located, it's off of the street, and there's this street retail. Like, we really want you to come and open up a fit bar right there.
Yeah.
Be our street retail,
No, I
come
know how
through.
that is with having helped people open studios. Like that piece of the location and the visibility is so important.
Yeah. So he's a good friend of mine, and he was like, come in, we'll partner up on this. We'll open you open the fit bar, people can walk through you, come back to the gym.
Got it. Okay.
So I was like, okay. So I go and I look at the space, and it's a very unique space. It's old, like, landmark theater that's getting divided up into different
Oh,
units.
cool. Wow.
So it really was cool, and it is cool. But I went, and like the space that we would have needed for the fit bar was way bigger than what I really wanted to take on. So we started talking to the landlord about, like, hey, like, we only really need this. He's like, no, you need to take the whole space. So then this big middle chunk of space is another like 1,500, 2,000 square feet. I was like, man, how the hell am I going to
What am I gonna
monetize
do with
that?
that? Yeah.
Like, there's no way we're going to do enough volume from the fit bar to be able to, cover those rents, which was going to be like 12K a month. I was
Yeah.
like, there's no way. So proud of myself in that moment. I was like, man, like, nah, we're going to have to pass on this. So I said no, right? And then a couple months later, I'm looking to relocate up to LA because my girlfriend's a singer songwriter. We wanted to get closer to the music industry and whatnot. So
Yeah.
move up there. Coincidence from this point on, right? So like, we go and we tour this apartment, and it's in Echo Park neighborhood of LA, and really love the space. We're getting ready to move up there. So the next day that I toured these apartments, my buddy calls me again, and he's like, hey man, I really want you to open up in Pasadena, because afterwards, the owner of that property, he owns this location in Burbank, owns this other property. He wants us to open up fit bars and Anytime Fitnesses all over LA, but we
Okay.
need to start at this Pasadena location. He's like, then once we do Pasadena, we'll open Burbank, and then we'll open up in Echo Park. And I was like, dude, I'm moving to Echo Park. I was just there yesterday. I was like, where's this location that he's talking about? He's like, I'll send you a pin. So he drops a pin, and it was literally where me and my girlfriend went to go get breakfast as we waited to go and tour the
Look at the
apartment.
apartment. No
So I
way.
told him, I was like, dude, man, I was just there. There's no gym there, because the landlord was going to buy this gym,
Okay.
right? And they converted over.
Mhm.
So I was like,
Mhm.
dude, there's no gym there. So he says it was across the street. So another part of that story is that when I was getting done with breakfast with my girlfriend and walking back to go check out the apartment, I did a little walk around the neighborhood, and I peered through the window of this gym that was across the street. And I tell my girlfriend, I was like, man, like, we really need to figure out how to do small versions of fit bars so that we can just pop up a fit bar like in a gym like this if we're going to move to this neighborhood. Literally was the building
Yeah.
that this guy was going to buy, right? So I was like, dude, that's insane. Like, what are the chances of that happening? I don't know. Like, there's no way that happened. So I was like, I got to see this through. So now I have to say yes to Pasadena so that we can actually make this whole thing come to life,
Work. Mhm.
because it was just so crazy that even happened. So that was a long-winded way to get back to this same space that I was having to deal with and figure out how to monetize. And that's where the Space Bar really came from, an idea into an actual business model that we thought was going to work. And
Very
I was
cool.
so close to these practices of the breath because I had been dealing with back pain for a very long time, several years at that point, and where I couldn't really work out very regularly. So like, this identity of being this strong fitness guy was starting to fade,
Mhm.
and I needed to bridge that gap. And again, that's where I started discovering breath work and working on my aerobic capacity, and my conditioning through breath. Um, that I really went down deep on that. So doing that with contrast therapy, ice baths and saunas is when we really put together the whole model of the Space Bar to fill into this space here in Pasadena. And honestly, out of all the things that we got going on, I'm probably most excited about the Space Bar, because I've seen how impactful it can be when somebody learns how to control their breath, and ultimately by controlling your breath you control, your nervous system to a certain extent, and you control how to down regulate through anxieties, being it just social anxiety or depression. All of these things, when you can tap into the breath, like, you are gaining power over these external stressors that have controlled you, that you didn't know how to deal with. And it's just really is kind of the foundation of everything for as in regards to fitness and nutrition, to starting with the breath and the mindset and everything that we can do here at the Space Bar.
And I'm really with you on that too, because, as somebody who's been very open about their mental health and having struggled with depression and anxiety for a really long time, depression only over the course of the last like year and a half. And for a while, I couldn't name what those feelings were, but something that I had always kind of leaned on was like, I saw my fitness and workout routine as my way of just like de-stressing and dealing with shit. But when you actually break down the science of like the way I was working out in terms of what it was doing for my nervous system, it was the exact opposite. And I think there is a lot of opportunity for more education around that.
Yeah. I mean, and it starts with, again, like understanding what it is that you're after. Like, what is your goal? And the thing about it is, no matter what your goal is, this is going to help you, whether it's fat loss or building muscle or just trying to deal with the stress of work and life and all of that. These practices are for sure going to help you, because I hope that it's common knowledge now that results happen in the recovery. That's where all of it happens. And if you're not putting your body in a position, like in a rest and digest parasympathetic state, it's not going to release anything. It's not going to lose any body fat. It's sure as hell not going to be in a position to build much muscle.
Nope.
And it just really starts there. But again, when all we're being told is that, we live in a culture where more.
Yep. More equals better. I say that
right?
a lot. That be not being true.
And that's just, been force fed, to us for so long. And until we have more people walking around and being living proof that are getting the results and getting it done without killing themselves in a very well balanced way, it's always going to be the case that all we are going to be able to do is more. So like, we have to, as leaders and coaches, really live that life. If we believe in it, we need to promote it and not just sell and promote the thing that puts money in our pocket. You know what I mean? Like, that's been kind of a struggle, and that's how the fitness industry has ultimately, and the nutrition industry too, has become this very dogmatic environment, because these coaches don't have the tools or the systems to provide you the real information. So then they have to create this crazy niche thing about keto and drive that home and put marketing dollars in, where now all you're seeing is keto, that just confuses people. You know what I mean?
Much.
And and that's why. And that's why I never wanted to be that guy. I never wanted to have to rely on one thing, because I know for myself that it's not one thing. We know that adherence is everything. So it doesn't matter. Like, if you're going to adhere to any diet, it's going to work to a certain extent, right? So it's like, if I know that, how the hell am I ever going to tell you that you need to do this other thing? Even if it's, to the extent of fitness. Like, I'm not going to tell you that you need to train X amount of days, because you don't necessarily need to. What do you want? So I want to be able to have an answer for everybody and not just give them some bullshit just because it's what is available to me to sell you.
And I think it's also created this pressure to have the answer versus being comfortable with just saying it depends. And I think really great coaches are okay with saying that versus having this probably a little bit of ego too, coupled in with like the sales aspect of it, right? To say like, this is why this is the problem and this is the exact solution that we're going to follow. I mean, so much of it outside of even your points of adherence, like I 100% am with you there, and have really been trying to figure out a way to package like describing the type of coaching that I do, because it's not even about nutrition at the end of the day if we like really dig into it.
Mhm.
And so much of the stuff that comes with that isn't like the sexy things that sell. Like if we're going to talk about building habits, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a really attractive thing to try to market, but that's all what we're doing if we're helping people in the right way and
Yeah.
giving them access to lots of different options. And also encouraging people to realize that you don't have to do all of these things at once. And I'm curious, from your perspective of having your hand in all of these different aspects, how has that kind of come through in your own life? And how, as people and customers that you've had and interacted with, like, what has that looked like for them? And then being able to just, start with one thing and use it as the gateway. You had kind of touched on that a little earlier when you were talking about like we had people come in a fit bar who never set foot in a gym, but they demonstrated a desire to care about their wellness through their food choices.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and since we don't really do that marketing, it comes from just like leading by example, and making sure that we're living that lifestyle and that ultimately we're putting out that content that's kind of touching all those points via, emails and newsletters or just, social media, or even this little
Yeah.
tagline. So, the taglines associated with the Fit Bar is going to be like mindset, nutrition, and movement, kind of like the new M&Ms, and where like these things are very crucial. So it's like the more we talk about it and the more that we lead with that, and we are that example of like, okay, damn, Jacob is not going to the gym 5 days a week and he's still relatively lean, and he's able to operate these 8 different businesses and still be at home to pet his dogs and go for a walk. Okay, what's going on there? How can I do that? And it's because there's a balanced approach to eating that's integrated within that throughout the week, and the mindful breathing throughout the day. And that, like you said, it's very hard to just and try to adopt all of these things at once, but it's probably harder to adopt just fitness, like to the extent where it's like if you're only having the
That's your
fitness
only thing.
conversation, it
Mhm.
becomes like 5 days. Well, that's, to me, is like, fuck, that seems like a challenge. What if you only had to go, do a little resistance training or even a body weight workout twice a week? And then the other thing that you relied more upon for the 7 days of consistency are maybe just a breathing practice that allows you to become more mindful, which ultimately is going to work on that mindset. And,
Yeah.
that is something like there's no real excuse for besides learning how to do it and then really practicing it. Because again, you don't need to go to the gym, you don't need to sweat, whatever excuses you have for not adopting that particular habit or modality, you don't really have with breathing. So starting there, um, and then again, the same thing with the nutrition thing is like trying to really establish these very simple habits that aren't like a crazy, overhauling and prepping 5 meals every single day. It's like starting from the jump with a program that encompasses all of these things. When you look at it on paper, is going to be a lot less worrisome in my opinion, because it's a little bit of everything. But again, that's what's needed in order to live a balanced life, because at the end of the day, when you're off of any type of program, you're you still need to find some balance, right? You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So like the if that's what you're ultimately trying to achieve, is this balance and this sustainable lifestyle, that's what the program needs to be, because that's ultimately what you're working towards, right?
Yeah. And I think the way it has been for so long, because of the design and the approach and the philosophies that coaches are trying to share, people are I always have to put like the sustainable lifestyle in air quotes, because people are taking this approach that's not allowing us to make it achievable when that doesn't have to be the case.
Mhm. No, definitely. um yeah, so how things with like, because you do take this healthy habit approach too, have
Yes.
you been how's that been for you? Are you seeing people a lot more willing to kind of take the slower approach?
I will say that you hit it right there in saying, are people willing to take the slow approach? That's the biggest obstacle. It's this instant gratification piece battling up against how do I do this the healthy way? And then you also see, so and so over here losing 15 pounds in a month. This person like doing whatever. I'm not like trying to, shit on any diet in particular, like just doing something that's yielding this really quick change. What I constantly have to go back to with clients is that thing going to be lasting change? And so many times the answer is no. I'll tell them, like, go check back in with that friend in 2 months and let me know if they're happy in the sense that they've truly changed something about their lifestyle that they feel they can stick to, or was that just a bit of a band-aid that got them to a mini goal, and then once they hit it, they were kind of like, I don't know what to do next. So what I will say is it's something that I've started to lean into more so now as I've gotten experience with more clients who have different personalities and different challenges in their level of being able to stick with something consistently. And honestly, Jacob, I think the thing that I keep coming back to is that we often try to make that we have this ideal in our head of who we want to be, what we want that to look like. And then we also have all these rules associated with how we are going to get there. And we think that unless we follow all of those rules at the same exact time, it's just not going to happen. So it's the struggle of that fixed mindset piece. And I think that comes from sticking to what you know, sticking to things that worked for you in the past for some period of time. So a lot of what I'm doing with people is just sometimes kind of letting them talk and then challenging them to say like, okay, well, you did that for that long. And if it worked, would we be here right now having this conversation? Probably not. And a little bit more tough love definitely coming into my coaching versus maybe in the beginning, I was a little bit softer about allowing somebody like to give themselves like the benefit of the doubt. There's a fine line with that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and it's been something that's hard, because just like, they're being bombarded with those quick fixes and those transformations. Like
Yep.
we know what marketing works, and it becomes this cycle, and where it's
Mhm.
like the same idea that we just have to be dedicated to that longer form educational process, because we can't play that marketing game.
Right. And
Um,
it's made me definitely have to practice more patience in terms of like my professional business growth, in the sense of I would rather work with people who align with the mindset that this might take a little longer and have fewer of those people, but probably work with them for a longer amount of time, right?
mhm.
And really nurture that smaller community versus trying to get a million people all at the same time.
Yeah, it really does become about consistency, and that's been
Mhm.
something that's been a struggle, because I do get pulled in multiple directions. So it's like this is part of where I want to create this space and be able to post up on the computer and just focus on the messaging, and every single day, dial that in, and they'll send out those newsletters, and send,
Yeah.
be way more consistent with that messaging on social media, because you know, we can only play that long-term game if we're playing that game. Like it's this idea that that's our approach, but then I struggle sometimes to get that content out there on a very regular basis, which is frustrating.
It
And then you
is.
find yourself in these moments, like there were definitely times when I was torn, during this past year with this new fit bar that was open, in Space B.A.R again. Like, so we did that Pasadena location with these huge expenses, with not a cheap build out, and we had 4 weeks of being open before the shutdowns. So like
Wow.
these new businesses are up here, a lot of expenses every single month, and we had no community around us, since this is a new business
It
in a
was new,
new
right?
city, right? So it's
Sure.
like, and you still
Double
try
whammy
to
right
stay
there.
true to this longer form approach to marketing. But like every single day you have this scarcity of like, dude, like we're getting our ass handed to us. Do we play that game? You know what I mean? And it's like I'm over here talking to the landlord about like, man, the situation, and he's looking at these other juice bars in LA or whatever, and he's like, you just need to really just hire nothing but like really attractive young people and get them on the sidewalk in like little clothes. I'm like, dude, that's not at all what we represent.
It doesn't align with
And
you.
right. And it's like, so it's like these moments where it's like trying to figure out how to solve this problem, needing a quick fix ourselves, to try to stay alive while not losing ourselves in that. So yeah, it's a constant battle, for us. So I know how clients, consume that content, that messaging about quick fixes and how that messes with their head, because I felt myself tested, over this past year on like, what can I do? Where's the gray area that I can get away with to get some quick money in the doors without losing myself,
Where are
So
you at with
ultimately,
that right now? Because I know we had a brief discussion about this, that's been the biggest struggle that you've been facing, but we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, but that doesn't mean you're going to be out of the woods overnight. So where are you in that process and working through it?
yeah, so we're trying to get back to some of our original programming. So one of the main differentiators with the Space Bar versus, say, your traditional sauna studio or whatever it was the coaching aspect and the accountability behind this. So we're taking a personal training approach to recovery. So we would
That's
have
really cool.
trainers on staff, that understood the breathing mechanics. So although you're coming to this Space Bar in order to kind of like de-stress and build up a little stress resiliency through the breath, like it is important for us to have you working out. So when you come in for your initial assessment, like we would do kind of a hands-on breath assessment, and then we'd kind of dive into your goals, and we would, write workouts to go alongside your recovery. You know what I mean? So like it would be catered towards, recovery being your focus, but at the end of the day, like we need you training. Like, what are you recovering from? Like, we want our clientele to be getting after it in life,
Yeah.
not coming to us like some other spa or sauna studio. You got smashed last night and now you want to detox,
Yeah.
with air quotes. Like, that's not who we are. We're actively involved and engaged with the lifestyle, and therefore so are we with the recovery. So that was kind of our approach. So with that being said, like we had to remove, step back from that, had to obviously furlough essentially every employee, except for, I'm still here, and, Alana. So we had a couple here, right? So now let's get back to bringing on the crew so we can get back to that hands-on approach and sitting down with clients and helping bring them through like a proper assessment. And then one of our main offerings was kind of this small group training, which again was recovery oriented. So we'd get a small group together, 4 or 5 people with a coach, and we'd go through performance breathing. So we would try to find like your baseline CO2 level.
Okay.
And then we would do these different breathing protocols in order to kind of increase your CO2 tolerance, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But it helps with a lot of different things. So we would do that as a group, and then we'd go down to our group room, which has our cold ice plunge as well as our sauna. And then we would put the members through a circuit. So we would have them in the sauna as a group. One would come out, they would sit with the coach in the ice, and we would help breathe, help like take them through a down regulation breathing protocol. And then they'd get back in the sauna, and then we'd go through a circuit. So obviously weren't able to do any of that during the shutdown. So trying to get back to those core offers and becoming what we had always intended for ourselves to be, this active place for accountability. Because if we think getting somebody to go to the gym 3 times a week is tough,
Right.
getting
That was
them
gonna
to
be my next
dedicate
question.
2 days of recovery or even 1 day of recovery is the challenge here. That's for damn sure.
But I do think the education piece, right? And to your point that you made earlier, and something that I echo 100%, is just the more we start talking about the importance of this stuff, I think eventually the easier that will become. But what you just described, it's like you see bits and pieces of those types of protocols that people take the initiative to implement on their own. But the idea of doing a circuit, I'm sitting here like so intrigued, like sign me up for that. I got to come out to California.
I mean, and I do really think that this is also why I'm excited about the Space Bar, because, if I'm not that guy to be organized and have the end in mind a lot of the times when I do these things. But with the space bar, I do see it as an opportunity to expand out and recreate this model, because it's perfect timing for the industry. It's taking what we know from our 10 years of experience in the gym business and the fitness space, that this is the time for it, and I was reaffirmed in that, and where it's like, yeah, I'm head down over here building this place out for a year, not seeing any other concepts that are the same. Yes, there's some people doing ice baths and saunas like outside and doing that thing, but nobody doubling down on a brick and mortar space to
Right.
create a boutique experience similar to your small group training models. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, we're about to be the first to do this. And then we get done with construction. I look up and there's a couple other versions of this out there, but none of it had the coaching aspect behind it. That wasn't um, what they were built upon. So being able to replicate this again, taking what we know from the fitness space and how community is so important to the environment at a boutique training gym, for example, bringing that in here and having a small group offering for people to connect, so like we would, you know, even prompt conversations for that sauna, so it's like, all right, what are we talking about in here? Like, we're not talking about, the Kardashians, you know what I mean? We're
Yep.
talking about who am I type of shit,
Yeah,
like this is the
facilitating the right
question for the
environment.
day,
Yeah.
and like imagining, because I don't know, have you ever done an ice bath before?
Yes. It's very cold.
Yeah, no, it's a
It's
it
you got to
it
be committed, right?
yeah, for sure, and it's a very empowering situation when you're given the tools to make it
Yeah.
empowering. It can be a very frustrating and kind of bone crushing as well if you don't have the tools, right? Because you're like, wow, you were just put in this situation of fight or flight, see what you're made of, and you
Yeah.
failed. You know what I mean, or whatever it
Mhm.
might be. But when you
That's a
do
really good
this
point.
experience with a group, like you literally having a near death shared experience, like, so it's like the connection coming out of it is like next level, right? And it's like, um I was just like, I know that will be this common thread amongst people if we can get it back to where it was and people experiencing it together, and then talking about kind of their situation and what's going on in the sauna and allowing them to build relationships based off of that. Like, I know it could really take off. And there's little tweaks that I would make kind of on the next version of this, layout wise, and things that I've learned thus far. But getting the right partners and capital behind us, like, I know that this could be something that could be recreated, with an element of fitness involved too, and the nutrition side of things too. And it's just, yeah, and I'm excited for it, and it's very
I'm very
powerful.
excited for you. You just highlighted something really interesting about the community piece in terms of a way to facilitate deeper and more meaningful connections, right? Because if you think about even boutique workout classes, like you can make friends there and bond with them, but you also don't, it's not like you're talking to each other in the
Hmm.
time during the workout.
Yeah.
So that's a really great point, and I'm very interested to see how that plays out as you continue to grow and make adjustments and everything. But clearly you're a very busy man, so I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I like to wrap up all of my shows with a quick little lightning round variety of
Oh,
questions.
oh, you didn't tell me about
Yeah,
that
I
one.
know. I was throwing it on you just to keep you
Let's
on your
bring it.
toes. Yeah,
Let's
you ready?
go. Hmm.
All right. What is your favorite meal that you have at FitBar? Do you have a
At
favorite
the
one?
Fit Bar,
Yeah.
I like the Loco Coco acai bowl. So
What's in there?
it's we use unsweetened acai. So like our
Okay.
acai bowls are still the OG healthy version that they were intended to be.
All right. I like to hear
So
that.
it's acai, has a little bit of frozen banana for the sweetness, and then it's topped with our hemp granola, cacao nibs, unsweetened cacao nibs as well.
Oh, now I'm hungry.
A little bit of almonds and coconut shreds, and then I usually throw a little almond butter on top too, because I'm always short in my calories and I need to get them in. So that's my go-to bowl. And then our smoothie is the health nut, is kind of a version of that same bowl as a smoothie, which is like raw cacao, coconut shreds, cacao nibs, peanut butter. and
Cool.
a little bit of banana. So those are the go-tos. Have
Sound
that almost
awesome.
every single day, like I said, like it's a challenge for me to get my calories in because I just go go go. So it's like, I'll load that bowl up and I'll get me a solid 1,000 calories in.
Yeah. No, I know that's something that I've definitely experienced in the past year in taking on more projects and trying to build things. Like I always had the mindset of being somebody who tracks my food for the sake of like being conscious of my calories and more of like a calorie deficit kind of phase, but it's now completely turned into like I'm doing this to make sure I'm getting enough. And that's
Yeah.
been a very interesting flip in my mindset and how I look at it, which has been a very positive thing for me personally. What's your favorite kind of workout? And it doesn't have to be in the traditional sense, since we can have a looser definition of what that means based on our conversation.
Yeah. Now for me, I like very slow workouts. So partly in part kind of what created some of my imbalances and injuries was like more of a powerlifting approach, but a
Okay.
very calm powerlifting. Like I like to know exactly what I'm doing on any given day. So whether it
Hmm.
was like um, yeah, that's how I gravitate towards like powerlifting. Just long rests in between. I usually got some like slow music and in the headphones too, and it's a very calm thing for me. So I definitely appreciate very simple, slow workouts of resistance training. Like I'm not one. It's very hard for me, and this is again why I tap more into the breathing to kind of work on my aerobic conditioning because I do not like to sweat. I do not like to work too hard. Like and yeah, so very slow and controlled. But I definitely like
Okay.
those workouts. Calms me down because I'm go go
Always up
go all the
here.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. You talked a lot about creating more space for yourself and mentioning that you're a creative person. So I imagine that's a goal of yours, and doing that and shifting focuses elsewhere can lead to more exciting projects or doubling down on certain things that maybe you've only gotten to scratch the surface with. So as
Mhm.
you're walking through that journey, what are you most excited about dedicating more time to?
Um, in part, like seeing these things through as they could actually be, right? Like I'm really
Hmm.
good at manifesting things, making things happen, and getting things to a certain point. Then my personality takes on, and like I get very distracted and want to go do that again somewhere else. So I'm excited about getting some help in keeping me focused on the things that I say that I ultimately want to do, while also putting together the system to be able to take things to where they could be. The Space B.A.R again, for example, there's no reason why with the right team that this can be a franchisable model and very profitable while doing a shit ton of good for people and giving
Yeah.
them so many tools, right? So it's like I know like whether it's a self-limiting belief or not, like it is what it is. Like I know I can't do that on my own. You know what I mean? There's no way. One, because I know I'm going to want to go and probably do something else, but getting the right team and then being able to step back 5 years from now and see 10 locations, would be amazing. So like I'm excited for that because I do feel like the pain is just close to being there to make that commitment to bringing on like a partner that can help me with that. Um, and then what also would come of that is like enough space for me to be able to think about other things that I want to do, and I don't want to be handcuffed from the things that I've created and ultimately prevent me from doing other things that I want to do, right? Like that I already
Yeah.
there's another business in my
Hmm.
head that I just want to launch, and it's been in my head for the past 3 years that I know could crush it, and I just know that I'll start that and I can get it to the point where all of these other businesses currently are. But then what? I have all of
Then
these
what?
really
Right.
cool
Hmm.
ideas and cool businesses that never saw their full potential
Sure.
because you know what I mean. So that's probably what I'm most excited about is
I love that.
doing that.
I love that. Well, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. Like I said,
Thank you.
I selfishly had so many questions for you because I have many ideas that have a lot of crossover into so much of what you created. And I really appreciate getting the chance to connect with you one-on-one and now establish this and watch and keep tabs on all of the big visions and plans and them reaching their fullest potential. So for everybody who listened today, please tell us where they can stay best connected with you and check you out.
Yeah, would probably Instagram, I think would be the best place. It's Cub_Saldaña, Saldana. Yeah, I would love, reach out if you guys have any questions on, any philosophies of mine or whatever it might be, anything I can do to help you. Let me know. Like I said, I don't really beat around the bush. Like I keep it very straightforward. So, yeah, let me know, reach out. Would love to connect.
Well, we love that around here. Cut through the noise, cut through all the bullshit. That's definitely a part of my mantra. So thanks again, Jacob, for everybody who listened today. If you guys got anything out of this message, please share it. Connect with me on Instagram at the Krista Huber. You can also tag the podcast at the FYX.officialpod. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. If you want to connect with Jacob, we'll also be sure to link all of his information down in the show notes so that is easily accessible for everyone. Have a great rest of your day, guys.